Okay, everybody. Well, thank you guys all for joining us today. Welcome to, I think this is our official 1 year anniversary for Unreal Orlando. And so for those of you who don't know me, I think you all do actually, but for those who might be watching this after the fact, my name is Tally Plawicki. I'm a technical artist here at Virtual Heroes and Applied Research Associates, and I am the Unreal Orlando community lead. Like I said, we've been doing this community for about a year now, and if you're not super familiar with it, or if you're new and just checking out the scene, what our goal is we work alongside the Epic Games team and Epic Games to educate people on Unreal Engine, to grow a network of developers that can support one another, and to find out more about what different groups in the Orlando area are doing in Unreal Engine specifically. So it's a really fun initiative that Epic started and we get to support, and it's a really exciting thing for all of us. And so today, what we are doing is we are continuing into the third event of our modeling and simulation speaker series. And we are going to be hearing from my company, Applied Research Associates, and the Virtual Heroes team. And we have a lot of really exciting things to show you guys. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to introduce us.
Do you want to hand me the mouse and I'll try to grab this? I think it wants. I'm showing the wrong monitor. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, let's see here. What monitor is it? Primary monitor 2. Maybe one of the bets. No.
Yeah, display settings.
Oh, I cannot ready that.
Yeah.
Try to ready look at this.
Down and then swap. And now
Thank you. I learned something new today. All right, so I'm going to be very brief and just kind of giving an overview of area Virtual Heroes before we dive in. Even though Tally's been leading this for like a year, I don't know if our area ourselves have done a presentation yet.
No.
No.
Yeah.
I guess we haven't. So take this opportunity to introduce us a little bit. So Area's mission, we're a technology-based company. We're providing innovative technology solutions to critical human problems. We have a mission statement, we have a purpose. We're also trying to provide a good work environment for our people. We know happy employees do good work. And we have some core values that really drive what we do: passion, freedom, service, growth. You see it on our nice little wall art there as well. And that really does drive a lot of what we do, the decisions we make. But to quickly get to, and yeah, we're spread across the U.S. mostly. But to quickly get to the Virtual Heroes Directorate of ARA, we are the game studio company, and actually we were. Virtual Heroes was a game studio company that was acquired by ARA 15 years ago. Virtual Heroes is celebrating their 20th anniversary now. We started in 2004 doing Unreal development, specifically work in the America's Army game. And I guess it was just 5 years later that we had a lot of successes. I say we, even though I wasn't with them at the time. Randy Brown was. Randy was the co-founder. A lot of you know Randy, recently retired. Yeah, so a lot of success those first 5 years, and then eventually ARA was looking to take a lot of our technical solutions and a lot of the modeling and simulation we do and marry it up with, a really good game studio that could highlight it from that gaming perspective. And so bringing the game technology to modeling and simulation, right? So a lot of what we hear about here in Orlando. 20 years doing that. We are an Unreal authorized service partner since they really started the program a couple years ago. And then we have a couple projects highlighted there. We do digital twins. Here's an example of us doing this. Is for the DITRA, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. example of taking some of our chemical biological cloud modeling and hooking that up to the Unreal Engine. That's something that we do that actually that's for training. And we actually hook that up. They put goggles on and do some VR training with that technology. We've got some digital twins of healthcare, some healthcare training, VR TAC, virtual reality TAC, the tactile assault kit. If you're familiar with TAC, we do the virtual reality variant of that. So just a real quick overview of some of the things that we do with the Unreal Engine within our studio. So, and then there's some of our clients, and now I didn't want to take much time, so we'll go ahead and go to the real thing here, what we really came here to see. Yes. You want?
Go ahead.
Okay, all right. I can let Wes, I think I'll let Wes and Murray introduce themselves. They're going to be our speakers to talk about this technology. So Wes, if you want to start, and Murray, introduce yourselves, and then you can go dive right in.
I'm Wes Milks. I've been with ARA for 15-ish years, I think. And this is what we'll be going through as a presentation. And actually, Walt, this will look really familiar because it's essentially the same presentation I gave at the Virtual Human Summit a couple weeks ago. But this is work related to what we're doing for the DARPA Triage Challenge. It mostly involves integration of BioGears and Unreal 5, and some of the interesting things we're doing there to bring us together and create an environment to support the challenge. Murray, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Murray Taylor. I'm a senior producer here. I've been with ARA for about 3.5 years. Before that, I made commercial games, including a game called Klingon Honor Guards, which used the Unreal Engine for Christmas of 1998. I think I saw Walt back there. Hi, Walt. And I think I saw Danny, but you guys are super tiny. I can't really recognize you.
Let's see, Murray.
Seeing you guys.
Jeff, do we not have good audio today?
That is good audio.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I could try to mess with the settings, but it's always
Go ahead and move it
dangerous.
forward.
All right, so a little bit about the motivation for why we were doing this work, the DARPA Triage Challenge. DARPA does these challenges. They do, I think, a couple of them a year. But one of the recent ones is this triage challenge where the gist of it is they're trying to figure out if they can use unmanned ground and air vehicles to survey a mass casualty events and provide some sort of primary triage information back to first responders so they can kind of get a sense of the priorities of which patients to try to treat first, which ones don't really need help, and which ones, unfortunately, are beyond help. Go to the next slide. So there's a couple of different aspects of the challenge. Our part of it is focused on the primary competition. There's also a secondary competition that we're not involved with, other than providing some kind of videos and media propaganda kind of information. But again, the idea is either fly or drive around the mass casualty events, identify the patients, so know where their locations are, using only offset sensors, so no contact between the robotic vehicles and the patients, using only non-contact sensors from somewhere between 1 and 5 meters standoff distance. Do an assessment of their vital signs, their injuries, their condition, and looking for what their state is. And then again, get that information through a control system back to first responders who can use that to try to help figure out where do they go first. Next one. There's a couple different aspects of the challenge. There's what they call the systems competition, which is essentially a real world environment. So they're going to be coming to a National Guard site in Georgia. They'll have a mix of mannequins and actors with moulage kits acting as the injured individuals. There's obviously some limitations to that. There's only so much realistic information you can get off a mannequin. It's not going to have necessarily the right temperature that a real human would. Might have some sense of vital signs, but only in the really advanced ones, and those are more expensive. And it has other limitations that it's obviously not going to be moving in a human realistic way. So it's essentially really easy to look at a video of a mannequin and know it's a mannequin. The same kind of limitations or similar limitations apply to the actors. You can put a moulage kit on an actor, but it's sort of frowned upon to actually put them into shock and mess with their vital signs. As much as it might be fun to do that, sometimes people frown upon actually, slowing somebody's heart rate down just for the sake of an experiment. So the point of that is, yes, you'll see the visuals and see that somebody has a massive injury or even potentially amputation on their arm as an actor, but they're still just kind of sitting there reading a book like nothing's going on. So there's going to be a mismatch between how the person probably should be acting and what their vital signs and their health condition should be versus what it actually looks like to the sensors on board the robotic vehicles. So our part of it is the virtual competition where we don't have those limitations. We've got a lot more flexibility and a lot more capability we can do to present the injured patients to the sensors and the algorithms who are doing the assessment and figuring out what the health states are. We can also do a lot more patients. In the system competition, they're limited to, I believe, it's either 10 or 15 total patients, even in the final experiment in the third year, whereas in the virtual competition, we'll have somewhere around 100 patients throughout the environment. So a lot more challenging to the competitors in terms of trying to find the higher priority patients, and a lot more flexibility in terms of the kind of injuries we can present and match between the physical representation, the gait, the movement, the mannerisms of the individuals, and their actual vital signs in terms of their health state. And then the secondary competition, which again we're not really involved in, is primarily a data competition. So in that part of it, they're looking more at historic data of where they've actually captured vital signs and hooked people up to equipment and things while they're being transported from a mass casualty event through either a helicopter or an ambulance. They've recorded that information, and what they're looking to do is use that recorded information to try to predict when a life-saving intervention would be needed and apply that ahead of time. But again, no virtual heroes and no Unreal involvement in that portion of the competition. Next one. I don't think there's much new here. It's just some of the challenges and some of the things that makes the competition challenging. There's terrain obstacles. Eventually we'll have dynamic obstacles, so there'll be things moving in the environment, including people. So by the time we get to the third year, there'll be first responders starting to show up in the environment, and the algorithms will need to distinguish between a first responder trying to provide help and the injured people seeking help. There'll be degraded sensing in terms of smoke and fog and things in the environment that'll make it, that'll have visual impacts on the RGB and IR sensors and other challenges that make it more difficult to kind of discern and see what's going on. Next. All right, so as far as an overview of the challenge, any questions or comments on the challenge itself before I move on to kind of what we're doing?
All good?
Okay. All right, so the gist of what we're doing is combining BioGears, which, if you're not familiar, is a human physiology engine. It's an open source tool that allows you to model I think there's up to 14 different human systems now: the cardiovascular, the respiratory, adrenal, all the different systems in the body, and all the interactions between them are modeled within the engine. So as you apply what BioGears refer to as insults, whether it's something like a gunshot wound or a medical intervention, some sort of pharmaceutical capability or pharmaceutical interaction, the BioGears will model how a body would respond to that intervention or that insult, in terms of bleeding, blood pressure, heart rate, all those different interactions are modeled fairly faithfully through the BioGears engine. So it's a pretty realistic representation of the human physiology. We can adjust for things like height, weight, systolic, diastolic pressure. So gender makes a difference in how it's modeled as well, in addition to age and some of the other effects. So essentially, we use BioGears to model the physiology. And then the next part is when we go through and apply that through the virtual humans in Unreal and actually make that detectable, which Murray will show some videos of how that works in a few minutes. BioGears is open source. It's written in C++, got Apache license, but if the link is there, if you want to go download it and play with it. We haven't done this, but I know there are other companies that have attached BioGears to mannequins and made a more realistic response from mannequins in terms of physiology and things. It's been used fairly extensively. We've used it for multiple medical simulations and medical experiments.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did ARA develop BioGears?
Yeah, actually, the original BioGears development was done by ARA, but the source code is out and published on that site, so it's now set up where multiple people can contribute and make changes if they want, but ARA was the original developer.
Got it.
Next one. A little more about BioGears and some of the human systems that are modeled. It does use what's referred to as a lump parameter model. So essentially, they use a electrical engineering or electrical circuit analogy to represent the different systems and the interactions between them. If you want to dig into the source code, it's actually one of the things a lot of people have said about BioGears is the documentation is actually pretty good for being an open source tool. So it's fairly well documented how the different algorithms work and how they're modeled internally. So if you need to make changes, the source code is there. You can tailor it to kind of what you need to do. Next one. All right, Murray, you want to take over when we get to the more relevant part to this crowd?
Yeah, I'll take over. So we're going to talk about metahumans. And so we decided to use Unreal 5, and metahumans was a big part of that. We knew we were going to have to create a lot of casualties, and this was going to be a nice way for us to take advantage of the latest, greatest thing in Unreal and make it look really good in our test bed. So I think most people here probably know about it, but MetaHuman is where we take 3 different scanned in people and blend them to create our own. You can see some of that going on in the screen right now. They come in with 8 levels of detail. We're going to talk about Carla. Maybe we should have talked about that before, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Carla is being ported over for Unreal 5, and that rendering, especially with the levels of detail, is going well, but there's a few bugs with that as we pop in and out of levels of detail. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So these casualties will be spread around in an environment where a mass casualty event has happened. In this case, it's a train derailment, and you can see a lot of people around. We've got smoke and fire going. This is where the autonomous vehicles will do their job. They'll fly around and find people and then do the standoff detection. So these standoff sensors mean we're not going to be touching people. We're going to get as close to a meter. And then the sensors, this is pretty remarkable. The sensors, even from a meter away, are going to be able to look at people and tell things like their rate, their respiratory rate. Kind of new to us. We're always learning something with every new project. But let's go to the next slide and talk about how that happens a little.
Wait, so this scene is from the standoff sensors? Is that with the train derailment? Is that like what the standoff sensors are seeing? Or just the scene for us?
You could say that. You could say that this could be a drone. We're just flying a camera through. But yeah, the drones have cameras on them. and they can fly anywhere they want in here. But one of the rules with the DARPA triage challenge is we can only get up to a meter. We can't get any closer than a meter, either a ground vehicle or an air vehicle. Allie, were you going to say something?
Oh, I
That
was just gonna,
particular video is more just
But,
kind of an imagery scene. There are some slides coming up that have the actual video that we feed to the autonomous vehicle.
Yes, but that certainly, I mean, it's just a camera flying through space. So here's some definitions of what we came up with, just because it's a little tricky. This is just meaningful for us when we're working together. An avatar is a virtual person in a virtual space. We create ours with MetaHuman Creator. So they look very realistic. Then we add in this BioGears physiology information. And now we call this a virtual human. So a virtual human is an avatar that has the physiology pumped into it somehow. And then a virtual casualty is a virtual human, you know, it has BioGears, but it also has a specific injury. We could say he's got a 6-inch cut, 3 inches above his left hip, and it's this deep. And BioGears will tell us all sorts of things, not only blood loss, but how does that affect your heart rate? How does that affect your respiratory rate? How does it affect your eye blinking? So those are the 3 big categories we have. Virtual casualties is what we end up with, and we scatter them around our virtual environment. Next slide. So this is the whole triage the challenge is broken up into 3 phases, really 4. We've already passed phase 0, which was just sort of a kickoff. Phase 1 is coming up this summer. And for phase 1, we wanted to have 24 avatars, and we can mix and match their skin color, their clothes, body shapes, gender. DARPA does require that they all be 16 or older. Yeah, so this is a fair representation of the kinds of things you can see. And this is really important because we know that skin color is one of the things that RGB cameras have a real problem with. They might be very good at one skin color detecting heart rate, but not another. So we want to make sure that all these different skin tones from the Fitzpatrick scale are represented. Next slide. Here's some more of our casualties. All the 4 metahumans on the left have the same burn. This is a little tricky. People that have worked with metahumans will appreciate this. Other people might just think this was easy, but we had to get the UVs to all line up on all of them so that this way we can say, okay, there's a burn on the forearm. It's going to look the same on everybody. It's going to mesh. It's going to map to the right spot of the forearm for everybody. Now the one on the right, Tally's got this video going. The guy has this BioGears information in him, and one of the things that we're sending into our metahuman is a pulse, and the pulse is reflected in subsurface scatter in the skin, and the RGB cameras can pick up this subsurface scatter and how it changes. So basically, if we look at our foreheads or each other's foreheads, we don't see a difference, but these cameras can see the slightest difference, and they can pick up a heart rate based on that.
Brad, I've heard you mention that a couple different times. Could you go maybe one level deeper? Because I'm just
Sure.
like on the how. So
Sure.
subsurface scatter is somehow affected by our heart rate.
Yeah. So, you know, as human beings, our heart's pumping, right? And each pulse sends blood through your skin, and you've got these capillaries close to the skin, and the capillaries have oxygenated blood in them, and so your skin becomes a little redder. Whatever your skin tone is, it becomes a little redder. We don't pump blood through these people. I think everybody here understands how the virtual part works, but what we want to do is we want to give all the signals that these drones are going to need, right? So we know that they're looking for this. So we said, okay, well, we'll animate this subsurface scatter. Subsurface scatter is how light comes into your skin, or perhaps a candle, something that's kind of translucent, bounces around, and then gets reflected back out. It's kind of unique. And so we said, we'll put a pulse on this and check it out, see if it works with this RPPG algorithm. We thought it would. It was our theory that it would work because that's what it's looking for. And we were pleasantly surprised that it worked the first time. So the graph, the red graph at the top represents the heart rate, and the red graph at the bottom is respiratory rate. So from within the heart rate, you can infer a respiratory rate. This is all new to us. This is the way the RPPG algorithm works.
Okay.
Jeff,
So
was
if I
there more?
had superhuman eyesight, I could see his forehead changing and.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
A couple more things. The RPPG, or remote photoplethysmography that Murray mentioned, that's a real world thing. That's not something we invented. That's, remember kind of back in the COVID days when you have to walk through those halos and you'd get a thumbs up or thumbs down from the guy on the other side, whether you could continue or not. They were doing the same sort of thing. They were looking to see if you appeared to be of ill health with COVID or something else. So they were checking to see if your pulse was normal, your temperature was normal. That's all done with, it has been done for a while with real world video and imagery. As far as we know, this is the first time that anybody has fed videos and imagery from a simulated environment into these same RPPG algorithms and gotten positive results. And we didn't change the algorithm at all. We used them off the shelf. We didn't have to retrain them for simulated video. They were able to be used off the shelf and fairly reliably pick up the pulse rate like being shown in this video.
Right,
And
right.
as Murray said, we were frankly pretty amazed it worked that easily out of the box.
And beyond that, we should go a little bit deeper, and I think we'll see it more in another video. But the algorithm is also, the first thing it has to do is say, okay, let's find a face. So it looks for eyes, and it does a good job of finding the face. That's what the square is around the face. And then the green square is, let's focus on the forehead and look for this slight pulse in the subsurface scatter. Next slide. Or are there any questions there? Because that is a lot, and we're kind of used to it now, but it's kind of new to us. It was new to us. And
Are you, I realize you're doing this for the DARPA challenge, but are you applying this anywhere else? Is there other, see, it seems like something that people might want to take a look at and go, like, how else could we, what other research could we do, you know, beyond what DARPA's trying to do? I don't know, is that an area that's being explored?
But you're absolutely right. When people see this, they start thinking of ways that they could use it. Right now, this is the only one that I know that we're using this for,
Got it.
but it has generated a lot of interest for sure. So I expect more to come from it.
Okay, we are looking at some other opportunities. This is less than 6 months old that we've been able to get this to work. So the brain cells are churning, and we're trying to think of other ways to use this. And as more government customers particularly see this capability, they start to have their own ideas. So there are several opportunities we're pursuing, but nothing else active or funded right now.
Hey, Mark, I had a quick question for Brian.
Yeah, Brian.
I don't know, was it involved trying to actually do the animation or the color change, these subsurface? I mean, there must be something going on there in Unreal that you guys had to actually program to get it to be realistic. I'm just curious what was involved there.
Yeah. So, you know, what I say to a lot of people is some things that seem hard are easy, and some things that are easy are actually really hard. You know, to a casual person, you would say, oh, just increase the heart rate. Okay, well, first of all, there's no heart. But for us, this is a pretty easy thing because there is a node for subsurface scatter, and we gave that an animation, and we can say, okay, it's 90 beats per minute or it's 70 beats per minute. And the RPPG algorithm picks it up accurately. We know what we're animating to, and then we put this algorithm on it, and it matches up. It's pretty, it's kind of blows us away. It's a bigger deal than most people realize.
Yeah, if you want, I can kind of add a little bit to like the subsurface scatter question. Just because, like, to kind of help you guys understand, basically, when it comes to actually putting it into the art side, since it's being driven, that subsurface scatter is an art thing that we're driving. It's like a texture. You've got like two layers that are getting layered one on top of another. So the topmost one is that like on this particular guy, this like Caucasian white color that you're getting. And then the subtle heartbeat that you're seeing, it's not necessarily motion. What that is that's a pulse of red, which is like a layer that happens underneath that initial layer. And the engine has a really cool way of just naturally handling the shading for that. And so when light interacts with the surface, it can start to pick that up. And that's what the camera and the RPPG are picking up, is that really subtle, imperceptible to us, but perceptible to the machine change in that red flush that's happening under the second layer.
So that's just a material blueprint that you guys fed the heart rate data into, or?
More or less, you could kind of think of it that way. I didn't set it up personally. I just have like a broad understanding of how they did do it. Yeah.
It is in the blueprint though, right?
Okay. Yeah. That's what I thought.
At the end of the day, is it visual if you were to zoom in on that area, like really, really close to the skin, or is there some way to pick it up with our eyes here?
Naked eye.
Nah.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
No? Okay.
Yeah.
And then my last question is it affected by lighting in the scene as well? Like for these virtual drones coming by, if they're sitting in the shadow or something, is that, have we tested whether or not that plays an effect?
Yeah, I think the shadow isn't a problem. The problems will become when things are also causing a beat. So what if they're close to a flickering fire? Or what if fog is coming through in little waves? That remains to be seen. That's our next test, is to add those things in.
I mean, your challenge is that could be a real problem for drones, and you want that real problem to show up in the simulation, right? Your problem isn't, your issue isn't to get rid of the problem, it's to reflect the real problem.
Exactly.
Okay.
The football casualties are laying with their head facing.
So the clothing is not its own layer. This is talking about how we couldn't, in the beginning, in phase 0, we couldn't have like a torso wound where there was a rip in a shirt and now we see the wound, because there would just be nothing there, right? Because we all know that these are just meshes outside skins. But on the next slide, we'll see that we've actually come up with a way of being able to have cuts through clothing and into skin. That's good. Okay, good. So you can see on the far left, the t-shirt, take the t-shirt away, there's nothing there. That was phase 0. In phase 1, we started to come up with this way that, okay, if we're going to texture the skin like this, now let's use the same, map it so the UVs line up. So now whatever shirt they have on will have the same mask on there and the same texture, and it'll look like there's something underneath the skin, underneath the shirt. Next. Okay, this is a good one. This is really good. So the one on the left, the avatar on the left, the metahuman on the left, has no pulse, no subsurface scatter. So the algorithm is finding her face, looking at her forehead, and not coming up with anything. The one on the right, we did do the animation of the subsurface scatter, and the algorithm finds that. It doesn't take too long to find it. If she moves away, these are real world problems. It's hard to keep her looking right at you so you can see it all the time. But when the camera really sees that area for a little bit of time, the pulse comes up. Next slide. Oh, one of the, on the left, we have RGB, which is pretty easy to understand. On the right is IR. So infrared is good for some things, especially it can be an easy way to tell if somebody's alive or not. Okay, if that person is cold everywhere, they're probably a goner. We're not sure how they're going to use IR. We know that they will use IR. And that's the other thing. We're going to learn a lot from the competitors. The people doing this are going to say, hey, we'd like this to happen. And we'd say, okay, great. What does that look like in the real world? How does your sensor sense it? And then we'll find a way to mimic it.
Murray, is ARAs, so you guys aren't competing, the competitors in this are the drone, people building the drones and building sensors for those drones.
Oh, yeah.
You guys are building this simulation environment so that they can test out their capability in the environment, okay?
Yep. Yeah, but think of it like, one way to think of it is like we're making a Formula One race car game.
Right.
And then we're going to have people get into the game and see who's the best.
See how well they do, understood, okay.
Yeah, I mean, they've got algorithms too, right? They have their whole solution's got to work in the real world, but it's also going to interface with the virtual world.
Got it.
So you could see in the beginning of this one, there was a little fire and the IR saw that as a bright white spot. Next slide.
Wow, she's suffering. Put her out of her misery.
So here's one of our, this is actually an interesting one because you do see a little bit of the flame flicker on her forehead. And it picked it up anyway. But what you see on the left side of the screen, her right side of her forehead, right above her eye, that's from an external light source, the flickering of the fire. That's not what the algorithm's looking for. In fact, the algorithm did a nice job of ignoring that and picking up on the right thing.
And that's just because the algorithm is tuned such to anticipate like light from other sources and cancel that noise out.
I don't know enough about the algorithm to tell you why it's good at that. And I believe
it matched the heart rate you guys were plugging in.
it found that for sure.
Got it.
And that light, the real light, didn't affect it.
Got it.
One other thing to point out on this one, that again, the teams, as they're looking at the videos, are going to be using it to support their assessment. Is if you look kind of at her armpit region, you can see the shadow change that's where she's actually breathing. So from the video, teams may be able to detect her respiration rate in addition to pulling the heart rate from the forehead.
Next slide. So this is a good one. This slide shows how these algorithms, first of all, let's find a person. And, fortunately, people are built in a certain way that algorithms can look for a head, 2 arms and 2 legs and feet. And then faces are just as important. Once we find a person, let's find the face. These are all critical parts for the drones to be able to do their work without a person. This whole idea is how can we get information, do the triage without sending real people in. Let's see, posture detection. Posture means something, especially for some respiratory problems. What else? Yeah, the facial detection is crucial for eye blinks, as well as this RPPG subsurface scatter. I think that's it. I think we were hoping, well, we weren't hoping, we were wondering if these detectors notice pupil dilation. And we're not sure if 1 meter is enough for them to really be able to tell, are the pupils dilating the same in both eyes? Next slide. And then these are our terrains that we're working on right now. The one on the left is the terrain derailment that we've been talking about. You can see those squiggly lines. That is the path that a drone will take. And each dot represents metahuman. And each casualty, I don't know if you guys can tell, but I do know that the color of the dots represent the injury that they have. I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but that's what that means. The collapsed building on the right is our next scenario. Eventually, in phases down the road, we're going to make it really hard. DARPA wants to make it really hard. They're like, okay, what if it's easy to find people out in the field, but what if they're partially occluded by the rubble? And what if they're fully occluded? Can a drone find something using X-ray, or we don't even know what they might be using? And then down at the bottom is environmental effects. Fog, fog affects IR if there's enough of it. And certainly it affects RGB if there's enough of it. We'll also be using smoke, and I think we're going to get into rain as well. But I think that's it. Tally, I think that's the last slide. So we can go into questions now if you have any.
Will the drones be like in the building collapse scenario, will the drones be going inside of the, uncollapsed portion of the building, or is this all outside?
Yeah, it's all outside. I think right in the beginning, they said you won't have to go into a building, but you could fly next to it and look in.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's give everybody, give our presenters a round of applause. And Jeff, if you could cut the recording, and then we can move into questions. It's right there, that little thing.
One other point,
Stop.
Murray mentioned the Carla connection. Carla is a open source tool used predominantly by the autonomous vehicle community, like Tesla and Ford and all the car companies use it to help develop their autonomous vehicle algorithms. To date, Carla's worked